Pleased to have you this evening. We have a couple things on the agenda this evening. The first thing that we have on our agenda is police hiring practices. Jackie, if you want to mention this, I know there was some question about screening for extreme ideologies in light of the insurrection on January 6th.
Yeah, I asked you to put this on the agenda, mainly because, like everyone else, I was glued to the TV on January 6th. And then the news that came out later, citing that there were a few police officers involved, some military involved, and then more and more about the different organizations that had helped organize the insurrection. So it just got me to thinking about the dangers, of course, of any extreme ideology, especially in law enforcement. And we've talked before about, how you hire and, you've given us terrific descriptions of what you're looking for. But I was just wondering very specifically, do you screen for these extreme ideologies? Is that something that you're concerned about and looking for when you hire? And of course, I'm asking this of our two police chiefs.
Well, I can jump in and say that it's a complicated question. Because I think we have to be mindful of the line when it comes to the First Amendment and, the right of people to have beliefs or opinions is very different from acting on those opinions. And so I think that's the first thing that makes this a little bit complicated. The second thing is, of course, that defining extremist ideology, what one person considers to be an extreme ideology may be different from what another does. I think that certainly membership in groups that are listed on the terrorist watch list are clearly, I think everybody agrees, extremist organizations. But short of something like that, it becomes a little more challenging to define when we're talking about public employment and a right to public employment. So I think those are two things to keep in mind just in terms of the challenges in defining the issue. That said, we do a very thorough, and I know Chief Pyle at APD is the same way, we do a very thorough background investigation that includes a home visit, neighbor chats with neighbors. We sort of choose the references that we follow up and interview. We don't necessarily just go with the references that the candidate provides. In addition to the background investigation and the various panel interviews that take place, and in the case of my agency, we do a community stakeholders panel interview that includes a number of representatives from diversity and inclusion in the process for both hiring and promoting within my department. And so in addition to all of that, we do a very comprehensive psychological assessment as well. And so that psychological assessment in part is looking for people who have sort of a predisposition toward the kinds of attitudes that might lead to sort of extremist behavior, I guess I would say. Beliefs that one person is better than another, or that their views are more compelling than somebody else's views, just as a general rule. I mean, they're looking for that kind of personality type, I guess, and screening for that. But perhaps most importantly is what we do after people are already hired and employed. And as we look at our police officers' activity, we look at their the traffic stop data, for example, officer initiated data. We look at use of force. We track all of that stuff and monitor it. And if it appears that we're seeing behavior that suggests either favoritism or adverse, sort of disproportionate enforcement action on the part of the officer, then we take steps to intervene. So I think it's a complicated process because it's a complicated issue, but we do everything that we can to screen at the front end and monitor at the back end in order to avoid that kind of, and again, what we have to focus on is officers acting on beliefs and opinions and carrying that out in how they do their jobs.
Thank you. And of course, I was concerned about the balancing of, because I realized people have the right to join organizations, and you don't give up your rights when you become a police officer by any means. So, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So yes.
Well, you do to some extent, right? So, police officers, once they are employed, and that's kind of one of the caveats here is that, what an officer posts on a social media site that in which they're identified as affiliated with the agency reflects on their ability to do their job impartially. It reflects on the professional credibility of the agency. So those are things that we can act on. But they still have a right to comment on matters of public interest. So, espousing an opinion about a politician, for example, might be argued to be a matter of public interest, which is still protected. But obviously posting things that are racist in nature or that kind of stuff would be something that crosses that line into affecting their credibility and that of the agency.
Can I just add, Jackie, that I believe both agencies. I'm familiar with both hiring processes for both agencies, and I'm quite confident that our exhaustive background processes in both agencies will screen out those types of employee applicants, and not just based on the types of questions we ask, but the thoroughness of our background takes 90 days. I don't know of too many other professions that are exempted from sealed and expunged record laws in the state of Ohio, like law enforcement is. If you want to be a police officer, you give up the ability in the state of Ohio to have a record sealed from a law enforcement background search, as an example of rights that police officers don't have that others have. Andrew's 100% right. Our policies that are in place once you're on board prohibit certain free speech behaviors and things like that. And so I'm quite confident that our hiring process screens out those folks. I don't know too many people that would apply to work in the city of Athens that are members of extremist groups, because nothing about either of our agencies says that would be an acceptable applicant. Nothing in the way we lead the agencies, nothing in the way we interact with the community would suggest that an extremist would find the Athens Police Department or the OU Police Department a good fit for their ideology. So, but like I said, having said that, I'm quite confident that our processes that are in place would screen those folks out, and our policies that are in place would restrict officers who maybe develop those kinds of sensibilities while after hired, but I've not seen it, not in my career.
Interestingly, we're going through a promotional process right now at my agency, and I think we've had a total of 5 candidates for 2 positions. And one of the questions that I asked during the interview process was that we seem to have an agency that would not tolerate the kind of kind of behavior that we're seeing in the news across the nation on the part of some police officers and military people. And I asked them how they thought we got there, and how do we stay there? How do we continue to maintain an organization that does not have members that engage in that sort of behavior? And every one of them said that our hiring process is so stringent that they think it starts with that and hiring the right people. And then it's the culture that we've created among the officers. They take pride in the fact that they remain neutral and objective, and that they don't engage in this sort of behavior. It's disturbing to me when I look at it at a national level. I've been in policing now for 30 years, and when I started, you really did take pride in the fact that after an encounter, nobody involved really had any idea where you stood on any particular issue. They wouldn't know what your politics were or what your opinion was about anything, because we kept that to ourselves, and we took pride in having that kind of objectivity. It seems now that there are some in this profession that see it as a platform, and that it's their right or their entitlement to use it as a springboard to advance their views. And I think that as a profession, we have to weed out those sort of people. This is not a place for people to use as a soapbox for advancing their own agenda. I'm grateful that we do a good job of that with our two agencies, but I think that needs to be a broader focus for the police service in general.
Thanks, Chief Powers. Any other questions or discussion around hiring practices or screening?
I'm just curious. Your answers have been really thorough and terrific. Did what happened on January 6th and learning that there were police officers involved, did that shock you? And did it make you think about changing anything that we do? It sounds like, yeah, I see Tom shaking his head.
It didn't shock me, and not because the profession is rampant with people like that, but that there are bad police officers in every state. And there are 900 and some agencies in the state of Ohio alone, but the vast majority of them, well over the majority, are 1- and 2-person small village agencies with little oversight, very few policies. And those are, I think they lack, a lot of those agencies lack a certain level of professionalism. And so, for those folks to be members of extreme societies and to have participated in that wouldn't surprise me at all. And like I said, I think our process has been in place. Our current hiring process has been in place since 2005, and I'm very confident in it. Very confident that it would weed out folks, and that our policies are in place to prevent these kinds of things. I don't foresee it as a problem for us.
I think I think Chief Pyle hit the nail on the head, that there are so many agencies, and it's funny, but really at both ends of the spectrum, you have the small agencies that lack oversight and don't have good screening processes, and to be honest, some of the largest agencies have the same problem. They're such large agencies that the span of control and the oversight just isn't there, and they need bodies to staff shifts, and so they're not able to be as discerning as sort of agencies that are the size of our departments. I mean, I think we can, I know all of my folks fairly well. I know them, certainly know them all by name. I've interviewed all of them for them to be hired. I have regular conversations with them. I know most of Chief Pyle's officers as well, and vice versa. I'm sure the same is true of him. And you don't necessarily have that kind of connection in a great big agency, and you don't have the resources, the oversight, and the hiring and screening. I mean, it costs money to do these background investigations. Like Chief Pyle said, they take a long time. We assign a detective to them. At the end of it, I get presented with a binder that sometimes, depending on the age of the applicant, it may be 3 or 4 inches thick. And, psychological assessments cost money. So a lot of these smaller agencies, and even some of the big ones, don't have the resources to pay for that. And so there are people that end up getting through and shouldn't, in my opinion, or certainly wouldn't at my agency.
Sarah, I noticed your hand was up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to sort of, as a follow-up, I believe that both agencies are doing the absolute best as far as hiring practices, but people are unpredictable, and there's sort of such a thing as radicalization or people becoming different than who they might have been when they were first hired on. If either of you are capable of telling us what the response of the agencies would be if, like, for instance, if you were to learn that one of your officers had participated in the activities on January 6th, how would the department handle that, and what would you be able to do?
Well, I think it would depend on the circumstances, the extent to which they were involved and that kind of thing. But I can tell you that my agency, we would open an internal investigation. It would be assigned to our internal accountability commander, which is Captain Harlow, who would then do a very thorough investigation and then make a recommendation and forward that report to me. It's quite possible in the case of January the 6th, where there's criminal behavior involved or alleged criminal behavior involved, it would have resulted in, almost certainly resulted in disciplinary action. I mean, there have been officers at my agency in the 12 years that I've been there who, if they are alleged to have engaged in some sort of illegal activity off duty, they've been fired. And, I see this as being no different. So.
If I had officers engaged in criminal behavior at the Capitol on January 6th, I would attempt to terminate them as swiftly as possible. Period, end of sentence, full stop. So.
Other comments or questions related to this topic? Very good. I failed at the beginning of this to introduce one of my good colleagues who is joining us, Ariel Tarosky. Ariel serves as Director of Sorority and Fraternity Life. And so, Ariel, it's good to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I wanted to come and kind of learn more about the expectations and how to best communicate with our student organizations as we are about to enter into the nicer weather. And while Fest should not be happening, I think that we would not be realistic to not prepare for them to still happen. Obviously with the start of the pandemic last year and all the students going home, we didn't experience a Fest season with the pandemic. And so I really wanted to have a conversation of what it looks like when there are large gatherings that are violating the 10-person, and just so that I can be more proactive in our efforts, because I think that there's been some mixed messaging about what that looks like as far as if students do see large gatherings and they call APD, will something be done? Should they call? And what that looks like. So I guess I wanted to learn more about expectations so that I know how to communicate on the front end to all of our student groups.
So just in a nutshell, gatherings of 10 or more people are still essentially banned by the health department order. And until that's lifted, we're not going to allow any public gatherings in front yards and public spaces. I know that there are sometimes lines in bars, and we try to manage that. But when you're talking specifically about house parties during warm weather, the department has their directives from me and the captain on this. This is something we talked about well over a month ago. They've been very proactive during the evening hours at breaking up anything that was in violation of health orders. I'm fairly confident that the message is out that we're not going to allow this on particular Fest weekends. If we have a sense that there might be something attempted, we'll take enforcement action on it immediately. We will not let a Fest type situation get rolling and then have to deal with that. I mean, because it's a violation. And so, as soon as 10 people gather in a yard, we're gonna address it. And we're not waiting for complaints. This is something that we can enforce without a complaint. And so our staff has been very proactive about it. But definitely students should call when they see it and it's going on. It probably just means the officers haven't seen it and taken enforcement action on it yet. And now, different scenario if the governor through the health director lifts that ban on 10 plus people, then gathering, then there's we likely will have a fest under those circumstances. But I'm also confident that we'd be able to police it. And so I don't foresee the governor lifting that ban before the end of the semester. I would also say that it gets a little more difficult when the parties move inside. And I suspect that's, if there's any kind of festing going on, it will be inside, indoors, out of sight of law enforcement. Those parties we're aware are already taking place. And we have received, rare, but we have received complaints of 30, 40, 80 people in a house having a party. It's an enforcement issue for us at that point, because without a complaint, we drive by, we might be able to see through a window that there's a ton of people in that house, but we can't see more than 10 through the window. And so it really becomes an enforcement issue and a civil rights issue at that point, because we wouldn't have the authority unless the officers could plainly see the violation and had a right to be where they were to see it in the first place. They can't assume anything. And so if we get a complaint on a house party like that, we try to address it outside the realm of the 10-person gathering and address it more from a nuisance party or a noise violation. But we're aware that's going on. So if we did have a fest under those circumstances, with the order still in place, I suspect it'll be a bunch of house parties inside, but that's not going to look like your traditional fest. As soon as there are 10 people outside of that house party or more, our officers are going to stop and break it up. So I don't think that there hasn't been much chatter about it, and there's not been a lot of intelligence, social media stuff, where people are saying they're just jonesing for a fest. And everything we've seen so far would suggest that people are going to essentially abide by all the restrictions.
That's helpful. Thank you. I know that we had a situation, I think 2 weeks ago, where there was a larger outdoor event on North High Street, and there were just some student concerns that when they did call, it seemed to be brushed off more. So if it wasn't a noise violation, then there wasn't so much that could be done. And so I wanted to just make sure that I could provide some consistencies to students, because they want to feel like they have the ability to start holding their peers accountable.
Yep. They absolutely can call. And if you give me the date and time and location of that, I'll look up and see how the complaint came in and what we did to address it. Okay. Because I don't want our staff brushing those kind of complaints aside anytime, day or night. Our directive has been quite clear. Our officers are proactively enforce the gathering of 10 or more when it's plainly visible and they have the authority to be in the position to view it. And from all the reports from my command staff have been that that the officers have been doing that. And so I'd like to look into that situation from a couple weeks ago, if you could get me the info.
I will do that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Chief, I know that one of the terms that you used was plainly visible, and given the density of off-campus housing and backyards that aren't as visible, does that kind of impede the opportunity to coordinate those parties? Or
backyards is less of a problem than inside.
Okay.
When people are inside, we have to have the right to be in a place where we can observe the people inside. And that pretty much means we have to be standing at the door or responding to some kind of legitimate complaint where we're standing on the porch looking through the window, and assuming the curtains aren't drawn and that kind of thing. It's not like we can get a complaint and just waltz into somebody's house and say, hey, there's more than 10 people in here, and all right, everybody's got to go. Now, when we address a noise complaint and the officers can, people open the door and the officers can clearly count more than 10 people in there, then they do break those parties up. So, but we're not getting a lot of the complaints, quite frankly. So
Other questions about public health reporting or enforcement or anything along those lines? Okay. Kind of open it up for any general discussion or topics that have come to light since we started the meeting. If anybody has anything else to add or contribute. Okay. Why don't we go around real quick? I guess we just sort of did this actually. If anybody has anything to report or upcoming events or anything to bring to our attention or the public's attention, feel free to speak up now.
Yeah, I'll go first. I just wanted to make a note that with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are going to be having Take Back the Night virtually this year. And so I really hope you'll all be involved on Twitter. I think especially now and with the stance of like the PDs being so supportive of survivors, it's really important for us to stand with them because I know that there's been a lot of anger and frustration and fear lately in regards to recent events. And so Kim, if you have any updates on that, we can both probably send some stuff out, but if you'd like to participate, there's ways to get involved on Twitter, but it's always a really fun, empowering, amazing event. And there's going to be a live portion as well as survivors speaking as well. So if you have any questions, please reach out to either Kim or myself, or sorry, Dr. Roos.
Yeah, I think it's the day of our next JPAC meeting. It's the first Thursday of April. I'll drop the link, or Mary Catherine can drop the link in the chat here where you can see how to get involved. We are going to have an hour of speakers, survivor speakers, and then a social media takeover after that. And then SAP is also planning what we're calling a cord cutting event during that social media takeover. And there's lots of other ways for you to get involved. From door decorating to lots of other things. So we'll drop the link in there for information. And again, like Mary Catherine said, I know a lot of survivors in our community are feeling very hurt in a lot of ways. So I think any way that we can show support right now would be really helpful and appreciated to that community.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Mary Catherine. Anybody else? Liesl, are you with us?
I am.
How are you?
I'm good. So I guess it's my turn. I just wanted to let everybody know this is my last JPAC meeting. My family is moving. We're relocating to Toledo in June. It was an unexpected move, but my son got accepted to St. Francis de Sales. And so it's an amazing opportunity. So we're going to take it. So thank you, everybody. And you guys, please continue to do great work and have great discussion. And I told him we're on a 3-year plan. So when he graduates from high school, then I get to move where I want. And that's probably back home. So maybe in 3 years, I'll see y'all again. But take care. And thanks for having me on JPAC.
Well, thank you, Liesl. Thanks for all your contributions. And
thanks for serving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Anything else?
You know, Chad, this just, with Liesl saying that she's going to be leaving, we have a lot of empty seats on JPAC. Are we doing anything about that?
I have been in touch with the mayor's office, and so we're working on that. And I'm also working with the president's office, and we continue to try to fill those voids. My guess at this point is we won't have a full JPAC given our time frame where we don't typically meet in the summer. It will probably be a full slate in the fall.
And I also noticed a bunch of us are due to rotate off in 2021. So that's another, we're going to have a whole lot more empty seats than we even have now. So
yes, I'm very aware of that. Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And Be safe out there.
Hey, Chad, I think Sarah Grace had her hand up.
Yeah.
Or did she not take it down from before?
Maybe it was.
Thanks, Chief Howard. I did. I just wanted to respond briefly to the comment about the vacancies and say that Mayor Patterson and I were both asked to participate in a discussion with a group from the Women's Center. And I was asked as a council member and as a member of JPAC. And a lot of the questions from that discussion were about how could individuals be more involved in the conversations around policing or just involved in local government. And the mayor and I both encourage people to reach out to the mayor's office because we have vacancies here on this commission as well as other city boards and commissions. So it was interesting because a lot of people expressed self-doubt about their ability to serve on a panel or a commission or even contact their local elected officials. And so I'm hoping through the mayor's encouragement and my own that the word will spread and hopefully we'll have a few more people who reach out to us rather than it necessarily happening vice versa. So I hope we'll see some more participation from that.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Anything else? Okay, everybody. Thanks for your time. Be safe out there. Keep wearing a mask.
Thanks. All. Take care.